Thanks. All right, so I'm Heather Larry. I am a research associate at the University of Colorado Boulder in the Institute of Cognitive Science, and I work there with a whole bunch of different groups that I will tell you about and try not to confuse you too much about. But it is relevant to the work that we do. So at CU, I work in the Institute of Cognitive Science with Tammy Sumner, and she's a computer science faculty member. But we also work with the University Corporation for Atmospheric Research, and Holly Duvall is one of our colleagues there. And we have a collaboration between the two institutions with a group called Digital Learning Sciences. And DLS is a group that started many years ago. They have about a 15-year history with this collaboration. And to understand the things we're doing right now, I need to give you a little bit of history on what DLS has done starting in about 1998. So in 1998, DLS started the Digital Library for Earth Systems Education. And that digital library, funded by NSF, was something that they started because UCAR, where Holly is, and the DLS group is a joint collaborator with, they want to change science, understanding, and science education and do what they can. So they started DLISI to have vetted resources that are open and accessible for anyone to come and get to help with instruction, especially in K12. And at that time, it's the same year that Google started. The search engine for DLISI was very sophisticated. You can constrain things by grade level and discipline and the type of resource you can find. And it got this going and people started coming to use it, and more people were coming, so they thought this is a really great idea. They went to NSF and said, we should start something else. So they started the National Science Digital Library and built on what they learned from DLISI to build out into more than just Earth Systems education. And the National Science Digital Library is a very big endeavor that they took on, and a lot of humility came out of this for the work that they were doing and getting resources that were open and available to educators to be able to use in their classrooms. Now, with these two digital libraries, they decided that they needed to have a little bit more than just resources around what is there for teachers to use, because yes, teachers come and get materials and they use them, but the context that they can be used and what can be done with them for adapting and use of them was not something in the digital libraries. It was just the content. So with these teaching boxes, they started this first contextualization of annotating around how the resources can be used. So they worked with that, and then they worked with AAAS to build strand maps for understanding of the concepts that students need to learn from the beginning to the end, and what you need to know before you can move on to understanding this piece with volcanoes. You need to know these different pieces. So with all of this, they were thinking, we're doing really well with science education. UCAR develops a lot, and they do a lot with climate research, but they really want to make a difference in K12 and not just the applications in real life that happen with what comes out of UCAR and the research that goes on there. So looking again at science education and STEM education, the people at DLS said, so there are so many different kinds of learners. There's diversity in languages, there's diversity in socioeconomic status, there's diversity in the types of districts that you have. We have a big urban district, you have a really small rural district, and everything in between. So education today is moving more than just the digital resources we can put in the digital libraries and the curation and content that goes into that. It's more than just the annotation that goes around those resources with the teaching boxes. We need something more because, yes, we have visitors, they're coming to the digital libraries, but it's still just not quite customized to what the teachers really need in their classrooms. We think we know what they need, but we're not quite there. So looking at all of these problems that are happening in education, or challenges, maybe a lot of people might want to see them as that instead of a problem they have to solve, but a challenge so that they can do something and make it better. They went talking to districts, and this is actually a photo from the superintendent from Denver Public Schools. He was having a really bad day. Talking about what can we do for our district? What is there that can make things better? Because we need to improve in education, especially science and mathematics. So we took this approach to the next step from everything they've learned from digital libraries, teaching boxes, strand maps, and the next thing in our journey was looking at the curriculum that the districts are using. And with that curriculum, they have all these diverse learners, and the learners need extra help, whether it's they're gifted and talented and they need something to go beyond what they actually already understand and can do, or maybe they're really struggling with their reading, and so reading a science text is really hard to do. They need something to support and augment, and the teachers need the support just as much as the students. So what we have done is this customization model of taking, and don't throw anything at me, publisher materials, OER from the digital libraries, and allowing teachers to contribute their own materials into a system that we have created, all with this idea of increasing student learning outcomes. The end goal is always to improve the learning of the students and to help the teachers with their own understanding and with improving their work in their classroom. There we go. So we have a tool called the Curriculum Customization Service, and this tool started development in late 2008, early 2009, and the tool is concept focused. So you started with Earth Systems Education, middle and high school classes, and we started with a participatory design process. How many of you know what that is, or have ever done anything with that? Awesome. So participatory design is where you are taking your intended users of whatever it is you're developing and you bring them in from day one and you work together. They are co-designers with you in all the work that you are doing. So you're not just developing something and then handing it to them and say, we think you need this in your classroom, it should help you. They come in and they say, this is what I do in my classroom, this is how I need support in my classroom, and then you start working on designing and developing something that they will use and that will help them with what they need in their classroom. So with a small group of teacher advisory board members in Earth Systems, we started the development of the CCS. And like I said before, the CCS had this idea of mixing all this content together. OERs, awesome. What the DLS group did with the digital libraries, very passionate about making sure that their OERs, the teachers are using them. But the teachers have a textbook that the district has adopted, they use it, some of them use it, that needs to be in there too. And the teachers create their own materials. They're sometimes a little nervous about sharing, but a lot of times they want to see what their colleagues are doing. So putting that all into the system, and with that, we're doing design, development, and research on everything that we're doing. So it's not just, here's what we have. We are researching ourselves, seeing how our relationships with the teachers in the district is. We are researching what the teachers are doing, going into their classrooms and watching them work and looking at their student outcomes, whether that's an exam score or getting any of the feedback from the teachers on what they are seeing with the students. So just really quickly, I want to run through a few screenshots of what the CCS looks like. So again, it's done by content. That's going off. So on the left-hand side, you can see the key concepts for the discipline. And right now we have middle and high school earth science, middle school physical science, and high school algebra, and we are moving into high school biology, which I'll explain a little bit later if I have some time. So we have what you can see is the EarthCom Activities tab, and that is publisher materials. So whatever publisher materials that district is using, we play nice, we talk to the publishers, and we work out agreements to be able to put their materials in here, and we chop up their textbook and align everything to the key concepts for that discipline. And the districts all do this differently. They don't use the same chapters in the textbook, they don't sequence in the same, so we can do that for them in the system so that it fits what it is that they need to do in their classroom. Caveat with that, as a group, we really want the districts moving to not adopting publisher textbooks like they have and using more of this assembly of open resources as the textbook, if you want to call it a textbook. Not necessarily adopting a textbook, but just using resources as their curriculum instead of a textbook. And they are finally, some of them, starting to say, we're up next year for textbook adoption. I don't think we want to go through that. What else can we do? So they're starting to ask us what options they have other than a textbook adoption. So the CCS, those publisher materials are student textbook. The teachers told us that they use embedded assessments from the publisher quite a bit. They have teaching tips. So everything in there is what the teachers told us. This is what we use from the publisher materials. So, teacher text is this huge thing and they carry it around, but they don't use all of it. So they only wanted what they actually use in the system. Then we have an interactive resources tab, and this is where all of the resources from the digital libraries are brought in, and we aggregate them out according to resource type. They're already done by grade level and discipline because we're in high school or science. And then we have it by resource type. And we have algorithms that bring them in based on the metadata, and the teachers love this delivery of resources to them instead of having to go, even though the digital libraries are vetted, they have high quality resources. Type in volcanoes and animation, they're still going to get thousands of hits, and going through all of that, it's really difficult. The delivery of the resources to them in their context is what they really love about this system. And then we have the area where the teachers can contribute their own materials, and this is their word, the My Stuff area and the Shared Stuff area, which is going back. So the teachers can add their own materials, doesn't matter what it is. It can be a link to a web page somewhere, it can be videos, lesson plans, PowerPoints, Word documents, media files of any kind. Put it into the system. They can keep it in their own area, or they can share it with their colleagues. They can tag it with different tags. This one's good for ELLs, this one's good for gifted and talented, this one has really good assessment ideas with it, and put that in for everyone else to see if they choose. We also have a new tool because the work we do with participatory design and our design-based research, we do iterative processes of looking at the development and the research we do. So the teachers kept telling us that they really want somewhere where they can organize the materials and annotate around them, which is a lot like the teaching boxes that they did with the digital libraries. So we have a new area called the playlist. It's been in effect for almost a year now, and the teachers can go in and annotate around. They can add directions. If anybody's familiar with the instructional architect, it's a little bit like that, but a little bit richer as far as what they can do in the dynamics of it. But they can bring in some of those embedded assessments, plop them in, put things around it that they want the students to know about. Their own materials, shared materials, digital library resources, and then they can put this up in their classroom and have students work on it. At this moment, we don't have student access, but it's one of those things that I'll get to, that we really want students to be able to be using the system, because it started out as a planning tool for teachers, but as the teachers are using it, they keep saying, students need access to this. I want them to be able to get to what I am doing. So, the next few minutes, just really quickly, the research that we're doing started out with a field study with one district. It was all earth science, and 124 teachers reaching about 8,000 students, give or take some. And then we did a replication study. This is where I came into the picture. I was hired to run this replication study, and that was with 6 school districts, so we're scaling out to see if what we're doing with the CCS can go beyond that district we started with who worked on the development of it. And we have about 200 teachers, about 10,000 students, middle and high school earth science and some physical science. And then right now we are working on a project called Inquiry Hub, where we're using the CCS and we're scaling it out to algebra and biology. So the algebra work and the biology work, if there's some time, I'll get into that. Our research program is all mixed methods. We are really looking at the adoption and use of the CCS, so we collect a lot of clickstream data and look at that to see what the teachers are doing, and then we use interviews and observations and surveys to find out why and how the teachers are using those areas of the CCS. Let's see. And again, all of this, I'm trying to get to this idea of the student outcomes. How is this tool helping the teachers to help the students with their understanding of the content? So some long quotes here, but really what teachers are saying that the CCS is really great for them for helping their English language learners. It's really great for them for having a place to put all of their stuff. They really like being able to see what their colleagues are doing so they don't have to recreate the wheel, especially new teachers, new to the curriculum or new to the district. And they just think that there are a lot of really great files in there. There's a lot of resources that they can get to that they know they can go and use and not have to worry about it. So some results, strong uptake from the adoption, which was really great. It was nice to see teachers actually using the system. They said it's more efficient for them, for their time, which is one of the things that we really hope that they could go in with this delivery of resources to them instead of having to go search for them, and have it aligned to their context and their discipline and with the key concepts that they're teaching. That would help them in finding what they need to supplement, support, or in some cases, there were some teachers who don't use the textbook at all, so they only used the OER that were available in the system. And they loved it because they just didn't like the textbook for many, many reasons. And you find that with teachers. And then there's some who go from chapter to chapter, trotting down the line in the sequence that they're told to do it in. But we did find from test scores from students that they did have increased understanding in their outcomes with the tests. So the replication study went a little bit further with understanding what the teachers were doing in the system and used a use diffusion model to separate them out into 4 different categories. Power users, they go in a lot, they use all the features. Features explorers go in some, but use all of the features. The specialists go in a lot and use maybe only one feature. And the lukewarms, they use some of it sometimes. So really interesting ones, the specialists. We had one teacher who had a lot of English language learners in her classroom, and she would go in 4 minutes max time in the system. And we thought, what can you do in 4 minutes in the system? That's crazy. But she was in there almost every day. So when we did an interview with her, we found out that what she does is she goes in, goes to the publisher material, clicks on the textbook, and displays it in her classroom. And then she has the kids read from the textbook, which solves 2 problems for her. They're reading, working on their English, and they have no excuse for not having their textbook because it's right there on the screen. But we did find from our student assessments that students who had teachers that were power users had effect sizes that were in the mid-range, which was really nice. And feature explorers and specialists, not really high effect sizes, but from pre-post, the students are gaining understanding. And compared to the lukewarm users, the power users and the feature explorer teachers, their students did a lot better in understanding the content and being assessed on it. All right. So the Inquiry Hub project, which I actually think is one of the more interesting things that we're doing, again, participatory design, making sure we're still doing iterative work with the development of the system. So we look at minimal viable products. What can we get into the system for the big long list of what the teachers want from us? What can we do first? What's the lowest hanging fruit? We have a teacher advisory board of algebra teachers, and they're working on aligning math tasks to the Common Core state standards. So they're understanding more about Common Core, plus getting all these resources that are vetted into the system for them to use and for their colleagues to use. And this year we're working on building out biology as we continue with all of the algebra work, and we're working with BSCS. They just got their IP rights back to their Green Book, their ecological approach to biology, and they want to rewrite it and make it a deeply digital textbook and house it in the CCS for the biology teachers to use in the districts where we're working. So it's really exciting. I was really glad to hear that they wanted to do that because, again, these curriculum developers, they're not publishers, they're curriculum developers. They're moving towards this idea that it's not a linear textbook and it's not a paper book that's printed and every 10 years, 8 years, a district adopts it, but that it can be deeply digital. You can start with cells, you can start with ecology, and you eventually get around to learning all of the aspects of biology that you need to. So we just barely started that last month, but we're getting there with that and hoping to have something for teachers next year. All right, so our current work, one of our minimal viable products is we want to integrate Google Apps for Education into the CCS. The teachers are really adamant about having a way to use a calendaring system with the CCS. So we're taking our playlists, so that they can put a date on when they want to teach what they've put in that playlist into their calendar. And we're finding that more and more districts are using Google Apps for Education, so we feel like this is a good place to be going. And I mentioned this before, student access to the CCS and the resources in there. Still trying to figure out how that all works. There's a lot of permissions that go with that. It's a little tricky, especially with underage kids and what they can access and what you can see and get from them. And then our Inquiry Hub grant, NSF, specifically said, we want a sustainability plan from you. How can you make CCS more sustainable so you don't have to keep asking us for money? Not that they are unwilling to give us money, but they don't want to continue funding it solely for the next 10, 20, 30 years. They want something. And I know in open education we always talk about sustainability, and I'm not sure how good we are at it. So we're exploring this. We actually have a CEO now who has developed quite a bit of education companies and sold them off and moves on when he gets bored, is what he told us. Bored, not challenged, and getting there with things. All right, just some quick lessons learned, but I think you guys can read these because we're going to run out of time and I want to answer questions. And you can get to these slides, I put them up on SlideShare. You can contact me if you want. Some questions, comments. Any ideas on how we can do our sustainability? I'd love to hear you. Yes?
Initially, how did you introduce teachers to the CCS platform?
So with the first development of it, it was a work through the district. So we work with the coordinators, the science and math coordinators, and they pick teachers who they think would be helpful in the teacher advisory board, and we get them on board, and then they start talking to their colleagues, and then we do professional development in the fall for all of the teachers. So we go down to the district, do face-to-face professional development. We also offer webinars, and it's a lot of getting the district to tell the teachers this is important, you need to come to this, emails out to their list so that they can come, and we go through and teach them about the system and how they can use it and what's valuable for them. But we really try to incorporate teachers who are using it so that teacher advisory board isn't there just to help with design and development. They are there to tell their colleagues, this is how I use it and why it's important to me. And but I use it a different way, but it's really important to me this way, so that they can see and not just hear from us academics why the system is important. So that's what we have been doing. With the Inquiry Hub project in algebra, the teachers are the culture of math teachers is different than science teachers, we're finding, and they are not using it as much right now. But we're finding that if we're getting the district to say more to them, that they're getting on board more. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit more about your incorporation of publishers' materials and what that means in terms of accessibility for your site?
Yeah, so the publisher materials, we have agreements with the publishers that if the district has adopted that textbook and purchased it, they will allow us to put it in the system, which means the system is password protected. So you have to be a teacher in one of those districts to be able to get into the system, except we do have a global district where everything except the publisher materials are in that. So we had a teacher publish an article about his work with the teacher advisory board, and we got requests from all over the country. Oh, I read the article, I'd really love to access it. So we put him into the global district, and they can go in, they can see all of the resources, all of the shared materials. There's just no publisher material, but it's still done by the key concepts for that discipline.
So does the open piece have a password registration element, or is it just accessed by?
It's all in one system.
Okay.
So to get into any of the district ones, you have to be a teacher in that district. To get into the global one, right now you have to ask us to give you an account, but it's free.
Okay.
So you can get into that, but there's just no publisher materials in that piece. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
How many
Yes.
publishers are, I missed the beginning, I'm sorry, how many publishers are participating?
How many publishers are in there? So we have, I had a picture of their textbooks right here. So IAT is the EarthCom, and I think that they do the Discovering Algebra as well. So we have a pretty good relationship with IAT, and BSCS is the biology group. but they're curriculum developers, so I don't know who's going to be the publisher for that. I'm hoping, crossing my fingers, that they will do an open license on that.
Okay.
Trying to push them towards that. Any other questions? Okay, thanks.